The top business stories, live from the Sky Newsroom. Markets around the world show signs of recovery after days of heavy losses on the back of Donald Trump's tariff announcements. But China warns there are no winners in a trade war as the Trump administration threatens to pose even tougher tariffs. And what about the impact on the British car industry? We'll speak to the UK chair of Ford live from the Dunton plant in Essex about what's happening to the company and its workers here in the UK. Yeah, very good morning. Welcome to Business Live on this Tuesday with me, Darren McCaffrey. Well, markets in Asia and Europe have started to stabilise today following 3 days of heavy losses in the wake of Donald Trump's tariffs. But the prospect of a trade war between the United States and China still looms large, with the Chinese vowing to fight to the end in response to the threat from the White House to impose even higher penalties on imports. Meanwhile, the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has spoken to the Chinese Prime Minister this morning to discuss the need to avoid escalation. We'll get more on China in a moment, but first let's speak to our business and economics correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, who's live for us. And Gurpreet, we've seen a bit of stabilisation on the markets today, particularly in Europe and indeed here in the UK.
That's right. A partial recovery in stock markets, really on the back of news that the US administration is perhaps showing signs that it's willing to negotiate with some countries. So Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is heading to Tokyo, where he will lead trade negotiations with the Japanese Prime Minister. And that was really behind some of the recovery that we saw in stock markets. The Nikkei in Japan, perhaps unsurprisingly, led the rebound in Asia, up 5.6%. And then China's, Hong Kong's Hang Seng, which has had an absolute battering over the past few days, posting its largest single-day drop on Monday since the Asian financial crisis in 1997. That was up 1.6%. And here in London, the FTSE up 1.45%, really led by those companies that suffered the most over the past few days, the likes of Rolls-Royce, which has been battered, a big exporter of engines and aircraft, deeply entrenched in the global supply chain. Well, that was up 5%, as was BAE Systems today. And Germany's DAX up 1.17%. So some positive kind of signs for the financial markets there, but I think it's far too premature to be saying that this is the sign of a sustained recovery or anything like that, because while there is some cautious optimism, Donald Trump has also signalled that, you know, he is deeply entrenched, he's deeply committed to this ideology of his to eradicate trade surpluses that various countries have with the US. He wants to shift the tax base. He wants to bring in revenue from tariffs so that he can cut income tax back home in the US. And he's shown that he's also hungry for a fight. As you were saying, his response to China after it said it would respond to retaliatory tariffs shows that he's not willing to back down. And all of that is to say that there's still a huge amount of uncertainty in the financial markets. There's still scope for them to fall further. The financial markets haven't priced in the worst case scenario, which is that this becomes a full-blown tit-for-tat trade war. So there is scope for further falls with all of this, and some of the uncertainty around tariffs, you know, the status quo on tariffs and on trade has shifted now, and I think it's going to take a while and some efforts for that to stop weighing on the financial markets.
OK, Gurpreet, for the time being, thank you very much in that. Well, we're going to delve into this a bit deeper now, because the head of the world's biggest asset manager, BlackRock, has already warned that the US economy is weakening in real time, and a slowdown in consumption will lead to a downturn. Even more aggressive tariffs against China are only likely to accelerate that process, with Donald Trump threatening an additional 50% levy if the Chinese didn't withdraw its own retaliatory tariffs. Well, we're going to pause on that. We're going to just listen into the House of Commons before we go to BlackRock, because I think the Chancellor is answering some questions. Let's have a listen.
All of the decisions that we make as a government will be underpinned by the stability of our non-negotiable fiscal rules. Mr. Speaker, a trade war is in nobody's interest. It is why we must remain pragmatic, cool-headed and pursue the best deal with the United States that is in our national interest. This remains our priority, and that was part of the discussion that I had with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent last week. But we have been clear, nothing is off the table. It is why we will continue to back British businesses during these uncertain times, particularly those industries that are most affected, as we rebuild our industrial base here in Britain. We showed that backing yesterday when the Prime Minister and I announced new measures to give British car makers certainty, stability, and to support them on the transition to electric vehicles. We have put forward plans to support our life sciences sector by cutting back the time it will take to set up clinical trials in the UK. It is why we are working with our international allies to reduce barriers to trade right across the world. Over recent days, I have had discussions with my counterparts in Canada, Australia, Ireland, France, Spain and France, and with the European Commission. We will pursue these talks in earnest. Tomorrow, I will hold talks with the Indian government as part of our two nations' economic and financial dialogue as we seek to secure a new trade deal with India. And finally, we must go further and faster in our mission to kickstart economic growth. I know that the challenges facing the global economy and the potential impact could be profound. And as a government, we must step up to that challenge to deliver security for working people through our plan for change that is underpinned by stability, reform and investment. Prioritising the builders, not the blockers. Reforming our public services, not defending the status quo. Investing in our long-term infrastructure, not cutting it for the short term. Security for working people. Renewal for Britain. That is our focus. And, Mr. Speaker, that is what this government will deliver.
Shadow Chancellor Mellström.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and could I thank the Right Honourable Lady for the advance notice of her comments. Mr. Speaker, this is a time of great concern for millions of people up and down our country, for businesses, and as an open trading nation, for our economy at large. Free trade has been the bedrock of prosperity for our country and many countries around the world for decades. It has raised billions out of poverty. Tariffs are the enemy of free trade, and we on this side of the House will do whatever we can to assist the government in getting those tariffs down. Having said that, of course, we will never cease becoming an effective opposition, vigorously holding them to account, not least on the disastrous decisions that they have taken already in respect of our economy. But we will be responsible when it comes to these matters, particularly where market sensitivities are engaged. Could I ask the Right Honourable Lady the following? Firstly, could she provide further details of the US negotiations and specifically whether further meetings with Scott Bessent and others have been arranged that involve herself? Secondly, what areas beyond tariffs are being discussed in those negotiations? Thirdly, what sectors beyond cars and life sciences that the Right Honourable Lady made reference to are being considered for potential government support? And finally, could she update the House on what options there are for protecting sectors of the economy which may be affected by the dumping of goods as a consequence of trade diversion?
I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for that response and also for his offer to work constructively. I think that in my time as Shadow Chancellor, those moments when we can work constructively in the national interest, whether that was in the response to COVID or indeed in supporting Ukraine against the aggression of Russia, it is when this House is at its best, when we work together in the national interest. The Shadow Chancellor asked for further details in a number of areas. Discussions are ongoing across a range of government departments, including the Treasury, with the United States, and I will be meeting US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent shortly. Beyond tariffs, of course, we are discussing a range of different areas, but the focus is on reducing tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade, with a particular focus on those sectors that are subject to the higher tariffs. Because although the 10% tariffs are lower than many other countries around the world, and we welcome that, the additional tariffs on cars, on steel, and potentially on life sciences pose a real challenge to our country, because those are some of our biggest export markets. It's why we made the announcements that we made yesterday, but in those sectors, automotives, life sciences and steel, we will continue to take the action that is necessary, working in partnership with business and also with trade unions to make sure that we are addressing those issues. We are also using institutions like the British Business Bank, the National Wealth Fund and UK Export Finance to help businesses through these times. The Shadow Chancellor also mentioned concerns around dumping. We, of course, are working with international colleagues around the world to understand those implications. But our first priority is not to create more trade barriers, but to reduce the ones that exist today.
There you go. That's the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, speaking in the House of Commons, confirming that she's spoken to the Governor of the Bank of England about whether markets are functioning correctly. Rachel Reeves also saying that she's spoken to her counterparts, the finance ministers of Canada, Australia, Ireland, France, Spain and the EU. And Rachel Reeves talking about how there are hopes that the UK can sign a trade deal with India, but also interestingly saying that she will meet with the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent shortly. But Rachel Reeves having lots of conversations and also suggesting the government will, of course, help out those industries that may need government help as these tariffs are imposed. Well, let's get more on this. I was talking about Wei Li from BlackRock just before we had to go to Rachel Reeves there. She's the Global Chief Investment Strategist. Very good morning to you. And this is a reminder, isn't it? It's not just Rachel Reeves, but indeed governments all over the world are having conversations with their central bank and with each other about how to react to these tariffs.
Absolutely. There's a huge amount of policy uncertainty. In fact, the policy uncertainty index is at a record high right now, and markets are reacting to that. So our view have always been that markets could come under pressure in the near term in the face of this extraordinary level of policy uncertainty. But over the longer term, fundamentals should prevail. And right now, fundamentals are still okay in the US, but also okay in the UK. UK actually so far managed to avoid the more aggressive tariff levels because UK trade with the US has been more balanced, and even on the margin, UK consumers could incrementally improve a little bit, given the high savings rate of 11% versus 4% in the US. But consumer confidence, of course, is a bit of an issue. But more broadly, just to say, near-term uncertainty, near-term pressure on risk assets, but longer term, we remain constructive on the outlook and we stay invested.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because in many ways, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the global economy at the moment. You know, this has been driven by the White House. Just to say, in the last couple of minutes, we're hearing from the European Union saying that they don't want tariffs and they're waiting for engagement in a meaningful way with what the spokesperson is calling their American counterparts. And the EU at the moment are holding back a little. China taking a very different approach in terms of essentially saying, if there's going to be a trade war, we're going to be part of it.
We will see which approach works, but the bottom line is our assessment of the US tariffs is that it's both a negotiation tool, but also a tax revenue. So we are expecting the average effective tariffs for the US facing off to the rest of the world to be around 15%, which is quite a bit higher than what we got used to, but lower than where things are right now. So we see some walk back from the current levels potentially in the coming weeks and months. But ultimately, we're going to settle at a level that allow the US to collect tax to offset some of the significant fiscal spend. We're going to be in this environment of greater fiscal spend, greater inflationary pressure, higher debt level. That's the case in the US. This is why they are doing it, in addition to wanting to close the trade deficit. But that's the case in the UK. That's the case in most places.
OK, Weili there from BlackRock. Really appreciate your insights this morning here on Business Live. Thank you very much indeed. And just a reminder that we're going to have a special programme here on Sky News this afternoon, a special edition of Business Live at 4:30. We're going to have a panel of experts answering your questions on how this may well affect you at home. All you need to do is scan the QR code that's on your screen right now. That will take you to the Money blog, and you can submit your questions, and we'll be posing those to our panel of experts a little later on this afternoon here on Sky News. So just how successful will the government be in shoring up UK industry, particularly the car industry, following yesterday's announcement to relax electric car sales? Well, Ford has today announced plans to install home chargers for free for customers who buy a new electric vehicle as part of its power promise. But will it be enough to encourage a higher take-up of EVs and insulate the company from the current economic crisis? Well, let's go live to Ford's Dunton campus and speak to the Chair and Managing Director of Ford UK, Lisa Brankin. Lisa, very good morning to you. I do want to talk about electric cars, and that's actually part of the narrative, isn't it, in terms of how the car industry may well deal with these tariffs, but we cannot ignore them. Ford is obviously an American company, but with a big presence here in the UK. What impact do these tariffs have on Ford UK, if you like?
So to some degree, we're less impacted than other manufacturers because we manufacture pretty much all of the vehicles we sell in the UK and Europe in Europe. So compared to other manufacturers, we're less impacted in the UK than some of the rest of the industry.
And just in terms of supply chains, is there any impact there? Or as you say, because this is with the United States, and obviously one assumes that most cars in the United States are domestically made when it comes to Ford, that fundamentally jobs here will be largely protected. Is that the bottom line?
So obviously things are moving really quickly, and we're doing a lot of work to try to get into the details and the implications of what's happening. But at the moment, when we look at where we stand, we're reasonably well positioned. And actually in North America, we probably manufacture more vehicles or assemble more vehicles in North America for the North American market than any other manufacturer. We employ more hourly paid workforce in North America than anyone else. And I think we actually export more vehicles from North America than anyone else. So I'm not saying that we're not impacted. I'm just kind of saying that the impact is probably a little bit less than some other people that you've spoken to.
And what do you make of the government's response? I don't know if you're just hearing there from Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor in the Commons, saying that she's engaging with industry. I don't know whether you've spoken to the Treasury or not. Are you looking for the government to do more? Are you happy with the conversations that are being had?
So we've kind of been in dialogue with the government for a little while, specifically around the VETS targets. So that's the transition targets to EV. And we've just finished a consultation where we'd asked for a number of items, including customer incentives to help drive EV demand. So the announcement made yesterday is in response to some of those things that we'd asked for. And it's very positive that the government's responded and helped us with flexibilities around those targets. But the one thing that's missing is customer incentives for the retail customer to help them step into electric vehicles, which is kind of consistently what we've been asking for as an industry, not just in relation to tariffs, but overall to stimulate the electric vehicle market.
It's interesting, though, because, you know, it does have to happen in tango, if you like, in the sense that, or tandem, in the sense that government regulation is kind of nudging people in a certain direction. And you seem to be providing a bit of carrot today with this announcement around EV chargers in people's homes.
Yeah, so if you think about the industry as it's made up, the sector of the industry that has got incentivisation, so company car drivers who get a really beneficial tax rate, the take-up of electric vehicles there is 50%, where if we look at the retail sector where there's no incentivisation, the take-up rate is less than 15%, which is why we've stepped in with our power promise, which is a free home charger up to 10,000 miles free of charge, and also free 5-year servicing, along with an 8-year warranty on the battery to make sure people have got peace of mind over that. And when you get your servicing, you also get 5 years roadside assistance. And that means that if you happen to run out of charge en route somewhere, you'll get towed to the nearest charger. So we kind of developed a package to give a potential electric vehicle customer real peace of mind and to really encourage them and stimulate the market to buy one of our electric vehicles.
And Lisa, obviously, you've noted that you welcomed the announcement from the government yesterday in terms of relaxing some of those targets. Just before we let you go, just to come back to this, because, you know, there'll be people watching this programme, maybe their relatives work in Ford factories. You know, we talk a lot about the car industry being pretty battered in this country. What reassurances can you give to people who work at Ford, or indeed the supply chains for those Ford factories in the UK, that, as you say, there is a lot of uncertainty, but you know, people will be worried today, won't they?
Yeah, of course. And I think there's a general level of anxiety around everything that's happening about trade. But I just want to say that we're focused very much on how we stimulate the market and how we encourage customers to come and buy our cars, but also our commercial vehicles. So I'm really confident with the power promise, with our free of charge wall box and mileage. We've got a really strong offer, and hopefully that will drive customers and stimulate demand for us.
OK, Lisa, really appreciate your time this morning at that campus in Essex. That's Lisa Brankin there from Ford UK. OK, let's have a look at those markets, how they've fared overnight. Let's start in Asia Pacific. As you can see, things actually pretty good, most notably the Nikkei in Japan, up more than 6% on that chat, that talk we saw from Donald Trump in the White House yesterday, that he is open to talking to a Japanese delegation about trying to strike a deal. Meanwhile, here in Europe, on the continent, markets again up today, making back a little of the losses we've seen, but nowhere near the substantial losses we saw over the last couple of days. And in London, the FTSE 100 is also up 1.73%. But given the fact that it lost nearly 5% on Friday, lost 4.5% yesterday, it is making a bit of ground, but not massive. On the currencies, sterling is up a little against the dollar. That is down over the last week or so. It was up at 132 not that long ago, up against the euro as well. And as for the oil price, it is not doing too bad today, but is down again substantially in the last couple of weeks. Let's talk more about this and what the impact might be on Wall Street, where there's going to be a bounce back in the next couple of hours. Lucy Coates is Investment Director at JM Fin, and the Head of Platform Investments at Hargreaves Lansdown is Emma Wall. A very good morning to you both. Lucy, let's start with you. A bit of a recovery this morning.
Yes, there is. And I mean, I think, really markets are hugely sensitive to anything that is said. And, we saw massive whipsawing yesterday of the S&P 500. But until really we see a more consistent message, then we're going to sort of oscillate. The markets are trying to guess, are we going sort of stagflation or deflation? And that's a nasty environment for equities, and hence why we've got the volatility. But on the flip side, you've got to admire companies such as Ford that we've just heard now, how they're adapting their business model in what seems to be policy making on the hoof, where you've got conflicting messages from Navarro, the advisor, and Bassant, the Treasury Secretary. So we'll just have to see how it all plays out.
Indeed, yeah, as you said, there's a lot of volatility, not least of all because the White House at the moment is quite volatile. Emma, we are, though, looking ahead to the opening of the New York Stock Exchange, just a couple of hours' time. And again, we're expecting things to be a bit better today than they have been over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I think volatility is the word of the year. Whipsaw definitely is the word of the last 24 hours. We've seen significant movements in the market. Yesterday, the US was really interesting because you actually had, within the space of a couple of hours, the market down 3% and then up 2% because of a tweet which turned out to be fake news saying that Trump was actually going to pause tariffs for 90 days. And that just goes to show how much hot money there is in the market and actually how much animal spirits are driving it. Quite often in this sort of couple of days after you see a significant downturn in markets, don't forget that at the beginning of yesterday, trading the S&P 500 was technically in bear market territory, you often see a bit of a recovery. That's what we're seeing today in Asia and in Europe. And I expect that to be the same sort of softness, slight recovery in the US. But that's not to say that this volatility is over. We don't think this is the beginning of a V-shaped or even U-shaped recovery. We think actually it's a very wiggly W for the foreseeable future as the tariffs and the counter tariffs play out.
OK, we are so, as we always are, tight for time. So, Lucy, just very quickly, what's your reaction to China's response? Fascinating, isn't it? That it's essentially saying, we will have this trade war if that's what you want, Mr. Trump.
Yeah, I mean, retaliation is the worst, to be honest. We need negotiation. And I think a sort of a calm response from everybody is in the sort of world's economic best interest, to be honest.
OK, Emma and Lucy, thank you very much indeed. Whipsaw is the word of the week. We saw that a lot on the US stock market yesterday. We'll have coverage from 4:30 this afternoon. But both of you, thank you so much indeed. OK, well, that is it for me on Business Live for today. Don't forget to join us at 4:30 this afternoon. Go on the Sky News Money blog if you can. Submit a question. We're going to have a panel of experts answering not just what this means for the global economy, but what it may mean for you at home, for your mortgage, for your pension, for your stock if you are invested in the stock market. That is at 4:30 this afternoon. Do join me then if you can. Up next, though, it's the rest of the day's news with Jane Secker. Stay tuned for that.